Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of When Love Comes, the podcast. Can y'all believe that this is season 3? I cannot believe it, but here we are, and I am very excited. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Thank you for being here. And if you are a regular listener, welcome back. I love that you guys have been following this journey with me. This podcast has been about a year now, and my heart is just full with the overwhelming positivity that I have received. And so we're just going to keep it going. So my name is April Nowlin. I am a certified relationship coach, and really my goal is to help people to do 3 things: to heal from heartbreak, to create a life that they love, and to prepare for and maintain the relationships they deserve. So that's really what this podcast is about. It's telling those journeys and the stories about people who have overcome some things and people who are living a great life and some folks who have found love again. So I'm really excited about my guest today, Venice Johnson. And let me tell y'all, when I met her maybe a month or 2 ago, we were in the Black in Business program through Goldman Sachs. And I think we met in like a hotel lobby. And when I met her, I was like, I got to have you on the podcast. But she is known as the boldness coach. And we'll talk about what that means and what she does and how she helps women to walk with confidence as they're in that dating season and in their relationships. So welcome to the show, Venice.
Thank you, April, for having me here. It's such an honor, and I am so excited to have this conversation.
Yes. So we both just completed the Goldman Sachs program about 2 weeks ago, and we were both saying how we were so glad to get some time to rest. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I'm excited to have this conversation finally with you. So I want to start with your 47th birthday. Now, I'm 48. My 47th birthday was, fun, but lackluster. Yours really stands out.
Yeah, my 47th birthday was probably one of the most unexpected gifts of a birthday that I could have ever imagined I would receive. So for my 47th birthday, I got a request for a divorce on my 47th birthday. I did not see that coming. I was not prepared for that. And, most times, people will say, well, you had to know something was happening. We were having some challenges at that point of that marriage. But even with the challenges, I was not expecting divorce to be the outcome. So for my 47th birthday, I got the request and the confirmation that we were getting a divorce. And I spent my birthday a couple of days really at the law library reading up on how to do a divorce. And I just assumed, like, I'm a business owner. So I'm like, okay, a divorce is really a contract, and it's the really kind of dissemination of a contract. So I'm going to go to the law library, get me a cup of Starbucks and get me a notepad, and I'm going to sit here and figure out how to do a divorce. And that is how I spent my 47th birthday, figuring out how to get divorced.
I can say that I know the feeling of surprise.
Mm-hmm.
My 3rd marriage, for those of you listening for the first time, one of the reasons why I started this podcast was after my 3rd divorce, I really wanted a safe space where we could talk about healing. So if you don't know the story, go back and listen to a few of the previous episodes. I talk about it quite frequently, but I woke up. It wasn't my birthday, but I woke up on a Saturday morning expecting to get in the shower and hang out with my husband to find out that he was leaving. And so I know that feeling of, kind of being blindsided with that type of information. And like you, we had challenges, but the interesting thing was before I received this news, I felt like things were getting better. And so for you, was there anything that was happening that, remotely said, we're good? We're fine. Like, we can get through this. Like, what was going on?
It wasn't actually, I think I had come to the terms emotionally that we were really approaching the end. Like, the end was very near. And there was a sense of calmness because it was like I I think 3 months prior to the actual divorce, the signing of the papers, I had already said, we're going to get a divorce. This is inevitable that it's going to happen. I couldn't predict that it would happen months later, nor could I have predicted that it was going to happen on my birthday. But I just kind of there was a calming, because I had already allowed it to die unto me, so to speak. And I think that probably supported the healing process to a bit, because when you're surprised like that, or when it's a total surprise, like you mentioned, yours was a total surprise, it hits harder. But there was something inside of me that was like, you know what, we're going to end up getting divorced, not sure when it's going to happen. So let's just kind of settle into this, and let's start accepting that the inevitable is going to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I tell people that the third one was the one that hurt the most.
Mm,
And I think it was because I was blindsided, among some other things. At that time, I felt like I got it right this time.
yeah.
Um, but you're right. My first divorce, we divorced as friends.
Yeah.
We were literally in the courthouse joking and playing with each other, and the judge was like, "Are you sure you want to get a divorce?" And we're like, "Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, we do." The second one, I had left that marriage. And so when I left, for me, it was done. But this last one, you're right, it was kind of the out of the blue. But what was interesting, and I think this goes to just like God's grace in the
Yeah.
sense of like we knew, like we know, we
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
something's coming, is I heard this small voice say, it's finally over. And it was almost like this relief.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
relate?
Because I felt that too. Once I got that confirmation in my spirit, and it really rested in my soul, I was like, okay, so now it's the process. So now we need to move to the process, and moving to the process, because we had been married for 4.5 years, and he had just met, like within a matter of a couple months prior to us divorcing, he had just met my extended family down in Louisiana. And so it was kind of like taking this person home to meet your family, and then 2 months later, this person that you took home is no longer in your family. But it was one of those things where we have to follow the process. I got to follow through in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine was so I got this news January 26th of 2019. We
Mm,
had taken family pictures like December 10th with my
wow.
entire family. And I'm
Wow.
thinking to myself, you knew you were leaving. You could have been sick that day.
You could have saved me some money. You could have saved all of us some money and time. We would have
Right.
took those pictures without you, sir.
Right. I had to go back and Photoshop him out of all them family pictures. Come on now.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So when I talked to you about this segment, you said something that I wholeheartedly believe, but I want us to
Mhm.
talk about. And let me say this, y'all. I am not pro divorce. I am not that person that tells
Right,
everyone with a marital issue divorce. I
right.
am pro marriage.
Yeah.
But I do believe that divorce can be a heartbreak, but also a breakthrough. And for
Yes,
some of us,
absolutely.
divorce is an answered prayer. So talk to me about that, because I remember you telling me kind of in those terms that like this can also be a breakthrough. It was a breakthrough for you.
Yeah, it really was a breakthrough for me. It was one of the opportunities that really gave me pause in life. And it gave me pause because, like probably pretty much a lot of single women, very accomplished, successful women in their careers, up until that point, everything in my life was just kind of, I was just going along to get along, and everything was easy peasy. I had a lot of highs in my career. I had a lot of exposure, in my prior career. I'm in my second business now. My first business was a temporary staffing agency. So I was really out there, and I was really getting my kind of ego fed from my business. And then to move into a marriage where now this is a partnership. So just imagine being the Lone Ranger, right? In your life. And then you're moving into that part of your life where now you're with this person and you're having to refigure some things out, right? And then as you're trying to figure things out because you're in the midst of experiences, then you come to the conclusion that this is taking me as far as it can take me, but there's something else on the other side that's important for me to learn.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have that level of discernment when it had come to the crossroads of the divorce, but as I was, processing and going through the divorce, I knew, April, that there was something bigger for me to learn on the other side. And it was the catalyst that actually propelled me into the breakthrough that I'm experiencing now in my life. And had you asked me that, a decade ago or so, I would have been like, absolutely, I'm not taking that route. Like, there's got to be a different route than to go through pain and disappointment. But in all truth and honesty, that is when we have our breakthrough, is when we have a breakdown.
That right there,
Mm.
so many times I think that we can look at other people's story
Yeah.
and we see the highlights, right? But
Yes.
we don't see the breakdown. And like you said, so many of us, including myself, I'm doing the work that I'm doing today as a relationship coach as a result of
Mhm.
those breakdowns, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Absolutely.
here's the thing, it took me 20 years of this journey of toxic relationships, starting with my first divorce at 21, my second at 31, and my third at 41. Notice the pattern,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But I would not be doing the work I'm doing today had I not gone through the mess of those relationships, right?
Yeah. Hindsight's always 2020, but when you're going through a storm, you're not thinking about the other side. You're just like, I'm in the moment of trying to get along. And I waited. I didn't get married until I was 42 years old.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
had been engaged prior, a couple of times prior to that, but not to the point to where I was like, oh, I want to go ahead and get married, because I was really like, my life is great. I'm not sure if I really want to get married or not, or something would happen in the courtship. And I would be like, okay, this person is not the person to marry. So I was paying attention to all of those signs. And ultimately, the age 42 came around and I'm like, okay, I've dated a lot. I've started traveling the world. I have a successful career. My son is happy, whole, and healthy and well. So I'm like, okay, marriage is the next obvious thing on the list, right? And that's how I really ended up kind of pushing myself, so to speak, to get married. Societal pressures, those articles that say, oh, if you're a Black woman and you're successful and you're in your 40s, if you're not married by this age in your 40s, the likelihood of you not getting married is very high. And as you age and blah, blah, blah. So I bought into a lot of the cultural stigma, that the masses had said. And I also bought into the stigma that we perpetrate within our own culture and then among ourselves as Black women. So I really got into that marriage from a pressured state.
Yeah.
And I just totally, just sidestepped all of the things that were important to me and the learning. And so going through that marriage and having that divorce was something that needed to happen so that I could ultimately find my voice.
Oh, oh, come on. I'm so glad you touched because I was gonna ask you about kind of the journey leading up to you getting married because I understand that pressure. When I married my daughter's father, I was 27, I think, or so. And I was the executive assistant to the pastors of my church. And it was a fairly large, kind of popular church. And I would hear people say constantly, well, it doesn't look good for you to be single in the role that you're in. And why aren't you married yet? And
Mm,
and so
mm,
it kind of became like this, well, I guess I should get married. And, I guess so, versus saying, this is not what God has for me right now, right? And I was in a relationship with a guy who was, I think like 13 or 15 years older than me at the time. That, I finally that didn't work out. Then I married my daughter's dad. But I get that pressure no matter where it comes from, whether it's
yes.
culturally, religious, media, family, whatever that looks like. But being in that bubble, in that, why aren't you married yet? And when you having kids and those type of things. So I completely understand that. I want to talk about, so you're 47, you
Yes.
waited till you were 42 to get married.
Yes.
What did that initial journey look like? Were you disappointed? What did that look like after that divorce?
After that divorce, it was really hard for me. I fell into depression because I felt like I'm a good girl. I did all the right things. Like, my son's father and I were high school sweethearts. And so, it wasn't like I was being promiscuous. I was out there in the world doing all the things. I had a successful career. I had really stepped into entrepreneurship from the deep south. I didn't have anyone in my family who was a role model. I never was the person who got in trouble. I was the studious person. I was the one who worked late hours, put in all of the effort, rolled my sleeves up. Like, I did all of the right things. I went to church every Sunday. I went to Sunday school. I went to Bible study. So I just kind of felt like I've done all of the right things. How could all of those right things put me in this moment? And it was bigger, hindsight again, that moment was really what it was, the springboard that propelled me, right? And so that pressure of me getting married was really heavy. And I felt disappointed in myself because it didn't work out. I felt like I was going to be judged by people because they're going to be saying, "What's wrong with you?" Because it was more like, you know, this person that that person seemed to be right for you, seemed to be good for you, and so, and then you got yourself together. Like, how could you make that kind of mistake? And I really was embarrassed to tell people that I was getting a divorce because my brand was really heavy in the marketplace, and I had this persona, about who I'm being in the world. And so it was a lot of pressure, to come out of a divorce and then have to explain to people, like, or feeling the pressure of needing to justify or explain to people why I was getting a divorce.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so many women and men, but so many women that can relate to those feelings of failure, those feelings of whether it's shame, right? How could I let this happen?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
smarter than this.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And then,
took total responsibility. I felt the pressure was on me to show up, to give other people an out, so to speak, meaning an out for them to justify their judgment of me.
yeah.
And that was a lot of pressure. And I didn't know at that time that that was not my responsibility, and that what they were putting on me perhaps was because they didn't have the boldness or the courage to be able to leave their situation. And I left mine, and it was almost like they were saying to me inadvertently, "How dare you give yourself permission to leave your situation when I'm stuck in mine? So
Yeah.
therefore, I'm going to judge you and shame you because I'm not able to leave my situation." So that threw me into depression, because I just felt the weight of that, even though they didn't say that, April, but
Yeah.
I was experiencing those emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. At the end of 2019, so I had gone on what I call kind of a year-long healing journey initially, which was me, God, initially ice cream and fireball, traveling. Like, that was my life, right? That was um and so at the end of 2019, I remember God saying, "I want you to tell your story."
Hmm.
And I was like, "No," because at the time I was on staff at a church, and
Hmm.
I was the person who, people came to in the prayer line, pray for my
Yeah.
marriage and pray for, these things. And a lot of people knew that I had possibly been married before because of my daughter, but
Hmm.
like no one except for like maybe my leadership and a few close people knew that was my third divorce,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I remember having to show up at church work every
Hmm.
Sunday. And with my situation, he left and didn't say anything to anybody. So he
Mm.
wasn't answering phone calls. He just left.
Mm.
And so every week people were, "Hey, where's your husband?" And I literally would be like, "I don't know." And they'd have this look like,
Like, what do you, yeah, right. What you mean you don't know? Like, that's your husband, and the pressure of trying to come up with an answer, and an
right.
answer that would be satisfactory.
Yes. That was it right
Yeah.
there, right? And then I would get the acceptable reasons for divorce. So
Mm.
I don't know if you went through any of that, did he do this? Did he do, you can only divorce this. And then I would get people who gave me you can never get married again because, it was just a constant cycle of foolishness
Yeah.
from folks. And so what did for you like that healing season? Because let me say this, I commend you because I know plenty of people who get stuck in
Yeah.
that season of grief. They get stuck in that, whether it's shame or condemnation, they get stuck. And so, what was it that started to shift for you? And
Wow.
what did that healing journey look like?
So, you know what was really interesting because it's fresh in my mind as if it were yesterday. I used to be this type of person that never remembered dates or periods of time because my life was always so rich and fast moving, right? My divorce became a pin in my life, around a particular period because it was so pivotal for me, on the journey of a breakthrough. And I remember washing dishes and looking out into the courtyard space from my condo window. And I remember having a conversation, with the Holy Spirit about surrendering. It was about forgiveness first. First, it was like, you need to forgive him. And I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me, right? Like, who finna do that? You mean to tell me after this disappointment and heartbreak, I got to call this man and I got to ask for forgiveness or say I forgive him? And the Holy Spirit was like, no, that's not what we said. We said that you need to extend forgiveness for yourself and forgiveness for the other person. So that
Mhm.
was the first kind of like, okay, all right. So as long as I don't have to call and talk to the person, right? Here I go bargaining with God, and we all know
Right,
how that can
right.
go. And so then the second step was surrendering because as a high performing professional, as a hyper independent woman at that time in my life, I was just like, I'm just going to roll my sleeves up. I'm just going to dig my heels in and I'm just going to get to it and do it. And what got me there wasn't going to get me to the next level of the journey. And so I had to really surrender. And I remember just bawling in the dishwater. And I remember having so many moments of crying. And what was important about that is because this may hit home with someone, is because of that being a strong woman that society puts on us as women and as Black women, I never really gave myself permission to cry. I never really gave myself permission to be disappointed. I never really gave myself permission to say, Venice, you did the best you could do. And you didn't do anything wrong. And I went through a season of crying. I would cry in the bathtub. I would cry when I washed dishes, when I went to the gym. I would work out so hard and sweat so much that I would be crying and hiding my tears in my sweat, at the gym. But I needed to surrender what society had placed on me, the role of being the strong one. And when we surrender, April, it really frees us from thinking that we got to figure out the answer. We have to be the one to do the next thing. And I asked God, I remember I would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes. I would cry at commercials, but I remember waking up one night, maybe 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, right? During the deep prayer hours. And I was like crying, in my sleep. And one of my girlfriends was like, well, why didn't you call me and wake me up? And I'm like, listen, you married. Like you have to explain to your husband, what's going on with me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And
Right.
now we all having a kumbaya and your husband is not invited. So I'm not going to call you. But in that moment, what I asked God to do, and I gave myself permission to do, was to break my heart down in little pieces. And I said, I am praying to sit with this heartbreak. I am praying to sit in this disappointment, and just God, I just need to have my heart to be broken into so many pieces because the only way that I am going to get on the other side of this is to go through this heartbreak, let it break me down, let me cry, let me surrender so that I can then get myself on the journey of healing. And that took me probably about a whole year because the conditioning of always wanting to be strong, always wanting to figure it out, always answering people's questions. How are you doing? Do you need anything? Well, what's going on? Have you talked to him? So the same kinds of questions that you were getting on the front end, people tend to continue to ask you that and they don't give you the opportunity to mourn the death of a marriage. And so I had a whole year of mourning. And then I also went through a period of rambunctiousness. And I was like, oh, I'm going to prove to myself that I am
Hmm.
worthy. I'm going to prove to myself that I'm a good woman. So I'm just going to go out there and I'm just going to date and date and date and date. And, so that I can get all of the accolades, I can get all of the accomplishments, I can get all the acknowledgement because clearly something's wrong with that person. And I need to prove nothing's wrong with me. So I went through that period, even after surrendering. I was like, okay, God, thank you for getting me to a place of understanding. But now I'm about to go out here and I'm gonna
Hmm.
prove all of this wrong, right? So then I got to a point, I was probably year 5 of my divorce. And what I recognized is I kept repeating this pattern in conversation around everything that my ex-husband had done to hurt me and disappoint me. That what do you call it, the victim story became center stage in dating. And I didn't realize that I was using that story so much in dating that I was actually attracting, other characters for the story that supported the victimhood. Because when you, and I don't know if people really realize this, when you're in a victim state and you're perpetually telling this story about victimhood, it invites that energy in, and that energy you invite in, it continues to perpetrate the story of victimhood. They just victimize you in a different way, because what you're really saying to them is, I'm a victim, I'm open to continual disappointment and pain, give me more. And even though you might be like, people don't say that, but that's what the energy was giving, right? So life was mirroring back to me that which I was disappointed about. And then it
Absolutely.
came to a point to where I was like, this is not working. Like, I'm exhausted, God. Like this is ridiculous that I'm putting myself out here and putting myself in harm's way, meaning putting myself in these dating scenarios that it's not emotionally or spiritually, even physically healthy for me. So I need to step back and I need to really start going inward, because I got to look up to see what's been going on with me, where I am bringing this energy into my life, where I'm disregarding, what's important to me and who I am and what I was brought here to do, and my purpose. And that opened up the door to, like, okay, you know what? I got lots of questions, God. I got lots of questions. So how about you and I?
Come
How
on.
about we start this journey together? And more importantly, how about I get on your journey
Yeah.
that you have for my life, so that we can get into this healing thing? So that's how it started, from having the breakthrough of that surrender. So I just encourage anyone who is at the precipice of wanting to go to the next level, allow the breakthrough to happen and accept the invitation for the breakthrough, and be willing to be in the experience of the breakthrough, so that you can be able to get the invitation for to the other side of the breakthrough.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a couple things that I think really hit home for myself, for
Mhm.
the men and women that I work with. One of the first things is the surrender. And sometimes we don't know how to surrender. Very much like you, through this journey, I was the person, I had purchased 3 new homes by the time my last divorce had happened. I had traveled out of the country. I had a great, so I had all these accolades,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so you're absolutely right. The first time, and I just talked about this on the last episode that came out, the first time I allowed myself to grieve the
Yes.
death of my marriages was after the third one. And that's what I realized, was that I just kept stuffing it down, stuffing it down,
Yes.
stuffing it down.
Yes.
And part of that surrender, like you said, I'd be in the car and I'm like crying, like, what happened? Like, I was having such a great day.
Yeah. And
What?
out of nowhere, just
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 out of
tears.
nowhere.
I mean, like the ugly cry, like the, yeah, like somebody just stole my toy cry.
Yes, yes. But I absolutely agree that I feel like that was God saying, it's time for you to surrender. It's time for you to stop being the strong one and stop, it's okay. And I'm okay. I am not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I did, because I have a saying that divorce is a death, but it's not a death sentence.
Yes.
And I was reading a couple books by Lisa Turkhurst. So if you're someone who's going through a divorce, she's got some great books on boundaries and just kind of talking about her story.
Hmm.
But she said something that resonated. And she said, in order for us to move into like our new life, we have to
Hmm.
accept that our old life is dead and gone.
Yes.
And so many times, and I realized that those patterns of toxic relationships is
Yes.
exactly what you were talking about. That I had, in some ways, this victim mentality, and broken people attract broken people.
Broken people.
And so that's why all three of my husbands were the same person with a different name, but same, because that's what I was attracting. And so on my healing journey, I had a funeral for my life on the
Wow.
top of a mountain.
Wow. Oh,
I
beautiful.
hiked to the top of a mountain. I
Beautiful.
had written out like a eulogy
Yes.
for,
I love it. I love
right?
it.
Because funerals are for the living. They're not, they're for the ones that are going to keep going. And
Yeah.
I just told myself that like I've got to grieve this old life. It's got to die. And that was a turning point for me. But you're right. I don't think that, and particularly as Black women,
Hmm.
we have been given, whether it's permission, encouragement, to surrender in that way, to fall apart.
Yeah, we're not. And we really ingest that in our lives that we can't fall apart. We can't let someone see us break down and it's just conditioning. And I don't think that we wake up and say, I want to be the strong one all the time in every way. But I do think that we wake up sometimes and we're like, I just don't feel like it today.
Yeah.
And then when you don't feel like it, then you go out into the world, or somebody calls you when you step into the world out of your protected zone of your house, right? Or looking at your phone and somebody says, I need you to help me with this because you're always so great at this. And so even when we try to say we're not going to be the strong one today, we allow the world to pull us back in. And before we know it, April, we're in that role. We're in that role and the time is ticking. Now it's the end of the day. We're tired and we're exhausted. And sometimes we're too tired and too exhausted to be able to grieve. And I think there's another thing you mentioned about you going to your mountaintop. We don't get to have the conversation. So I really appreciate this conversation in the podcast in your podcast show, is that we don't get to see the demonstration or demonstrations of what it looks like, what vulnerability looks like, what release looks like. And that's why I was called to be the boldness coach. Because when I went through the divorce, it was like a friend of mine, we had a conversation and she was like, what is it that you've learned from this experience? And I was like, I really never want a woman to be in this position again where she feels powerless. Like I want her to be bold enough to make a choice and to stand in it. And I actually ran from that for several years because, God has said, okay, you're going to be the boldness coach. And I'm like, you're kidding me because I don't feel bold. And
Mm.
then I was like, and who goes around on the planet calling themselves the boldness coach? And the spirit was like, you do. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. So for those couple years after my divorce, I just struggled because I felt like that was an imposter part of me who was going to accept me for that. And then also, I knew, April, that it was going to have a level of responsibility for me. And I knew I was going to have to let the old me die. And I was gripping onto what I knew and what was familiar to me with everything in my body. And finally, one morning, I was like, you know what? All right, God, you win. I'm tired. So that's surrendering. So I'm glad to hear you say that was your mountaintop, and my mountaintop was surrendering and using that experience of life to really propel me to where I am now in my life. And that's what a breakthrough can do for us when we let go of what's not serving us in our lives. We can get to the purpose of what we really came here to do.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I love just how God, when we allow Him,
Yes.
like you said, to put those pieces back together, but we have to be bold enough to fall apart. And that's not something that we talk about, I think, enough. And even with the people that we're responsible for. During my third divorce, my daughter was just 10. And I initially was like, okay, she knows he's not here anymore. We're not going to talk about it. And I said,
Mm,
no, no,
right.
because just like I am going through this, she is going through this. And so
Yes.
there were days that I allowed her to see me cry or to see me,
Yes.
and mommy, what's wrong? And I would tell her, like my heart's broken and, I missed this, or I'm not sure what to do next on her level, right? For a
Yeah,
10-year old.
of course, of
But
course.
I remember we were talking one day and she said two things that I was just like, whose child is this? She goes, you know what, Mom? I don't want you to die alone. And I was like, okay.
Wow, wow.
And then she says, but I just don't think he was your person. So you need to find your person. And
I
I was like,
love
thanks,
that.
babe.
I love that.
Thank
I
you.
love that.
But being able to be vulnerable with the people that we're responsible to and the people that love us in a safe space. I remember having this feeling during that time of surrender where God was almost looking at me like I was a little child and he was going, are you done yet? You done
Yeah.
doing it your way? You ready to try it my way? And I was just kind of like, okay,
Right.
Dad,
Right.
I'll do it your way.
Yeah, that's how I felt. It was like, so you tired now, Venice? You when you get tired, like as if
Let me
God is
know.
in the corner filing God's nails, like, okay, whenever she gets ready, is she ready yet? Nope. Okay, well, whenever she gets ready, and we do get to that point where we're like, this isn't working this way for me anymore. And there were several more layers that I went through, because when I opened myself up to God, opened myself up to myself, I really, I'm like, I choose not to, repeat those patterns again. And I've let that old part of my life die. And my therapist said to me one time, my therapist was like, I can help you, but I can't help you because you know this woman, but you don't know that woman. And I had to go and discover that woman. And that woman is the next level of who I became. But I was just so familiar with who I was, and giving myself permission to allow who I was to die so that I could rebirth into who I am becoming. That was really big. And I didn't see those demonstrations. And when God called me to be the boldness coach, then I realized this is an enormity of responsibility. So if I'm going to go into the birthing and coming home to myself, I'm going to have to go all the way in, which led me to living in a life of solitude.
Yeah. Yeah, we need that sometimes. I equate solitude, and let me say this, solitude is healthy,
Yes.
isolation is dangerous.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
right, like solitude is those moments where I have, like you said, purposely set aside time. I am
Yes.
purposely spending time by myself or with God to better myself.
Yes.
Isolation is when we are intentionally pushing people away. And that can be dangerous. But I equate it to that caterpillar, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is turning into the butterfly. Like the caterpillar is in that cocoon by himself.
Yeah.
Like it's just that caterpillar and God, right?
Yep.
And so
Yep.
we need those seasons of aloneness
We do.
to, like you said, get to know not just the person we were, but the person we are becoming. And I
Yes.
think that you're right when you said sometimes we don't slow down enough to
Yeah.
allow that to happen. And that might mean I'm not hanging out this month. I'm not, going these places. Like I'm really going to focus on myself and that journey of self-discovery.
And solitude for me, and I know this is the conversation we had, in the lobby in Jersey City. I share with you about really accepting and choosing solitude in my life, because solitude allows us to be able to connect with discernment, because you start to cut out noise and you start to realize that you need to set boundaries. And boundaries aren't to keep other people in, boundaries are guardrails for ourselves. And I really learned to appreciate that. And one day I didn't wake up and say, oh, I'm going to put myself in solitude. What was happening though is that the things that I had been participating in and the noise that I was hearing, I just started having a disdain for that. And I started saying, I would go places and I'd be like, I don't feel good being here. Like, there's nothing wrong with the people, but I don't feel good being here. And I started to realize that I was being transactional, in a lot of my interaction. And there were moments where I was being transactional with myself because I was trying to show up and be something that what other people thought I'm supposed to be when I show up in the room. And I just started having these out of body experiences of a comfortableness. And then I would get invitations to go places with people that that I had friendships with. But when I would get with those people, it was just a lot of negativity. And I was really trying to make sense of getting clear language, getting directional language. I was trying to make sense of listening to my spirit, and I just couldn't do that in those environments where it was so noisy. And so coming into solitude, and I live alone. So some people might say, well, wait a minute, if you live alone, don't you automatically have solitude? The answer is no, because there are so many distractions. There's TV, there's your phone, there's housework. I mean, there's just life. There's the running and doing the errands, there's the grocery store, there's the cleaning. Like there are so many things that can keep us busy and give us a lot of busyness that it will distract us from sitting and listening. So that was the thing that I needed to make a choice on. And I had to really choose to be intentional on the way that I dated,
Mm.
because I needed to make sure that I was dating in the way that harmonized, as opposed to dating because I feel like I'm missing something or need to prove something to myself or prove something to other people. And so when I stepped back and I started realizing how I was dating, why I was dating April, it changed the whole dating game for me.
Yes.
And I was also able to get clear about what the mirror was telling me. I had spent those formative years being, transactional because I was looking for the daddy. I was looking for men to say, you've done a great job, you're smart, you're intelligent, you run a company, you're an international traveler, you don't have no drama popping. And so the solitude allowed me to really tap into the little girl in me so that I could understand what my deficiencies were as it related to the female and male connection. And once I got clear about that, I was able to really forgive myself. I was able to really look back on those dating experiences and appreciate the experiences, good, bad, or indifference, that I had, and to give God thanks for protecting me during those experiences. But I realized, and even that marriage, I realized how I needed all of those experiences to be able to become the woman that I am.
So, one of the things that I feel like hits home when we talk about solitude is I have met so many people who cannot be alone with themselves. Like you said, the distractions, needing to have a person around. And one of the things that I do with my clients that are coming out of relationships is I challenge them to do things like solo travel, solo activities. Because here's the thing, if you can't enjoy being with you,
Yeah.
no one else is going to enjoy being with you because you're going to keep picking the wrong people to fill that space. And so I had a client that I talked to just this morning who took a solo trip to Miami. And she was like, April, I was so scared of going. And I said, well, how'd it go? She was like, I had the best time. She was like, I had the best time. But a big part of that, I said, well, what came out of it? And she said, I got to know myself.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that I think we get into these relationships not knowing ourselves,
Yeah.
and then we tend to morph into what the other person needs or wants or desires. Then we lose ourselves. And so I think that solitude time, and let me say this, y'all, we're not talking about just as a single person.
Sure.
I
Right.
believe that
Absolutely.
humans need
Right.
solitude,
Yeah.
whether you're
Even
married.
Jesus, like even Jesus
Look,
had solitude. Even Jesus went up to take a nap and went off, needed time from people, to be able to pray and to be able to get a word.
yes, so solitude is very, very, very important. So I want to dig into just a little bit more
Sure.
about how you help women. You've got this incredible journey, and I'm so grateful
Mm.
that people like you are not just walking that journey and kind of leaving it be, but that you're using that to help other women. So tell me, how do you support women?
So, what's really interesting is when I accepted the calling on my life to be the boldness coach, one of the reasons that I tried to push back because I knew it held a big responsibility. And I knew that it was going to require me to bring transparency to the way that I showed up in the world. And I knew that as I was showing up in the world that I would need to be really truthful and honest and vulnerable in the way that I was living my life just between me, myself, and I. And that was really because I'm like, we like to protect or hide parts of us, right? Whether we're intentional or unintentional about it, right? And also, we are very performative beings. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, oh, today I'm going to perform and be this other person for other people. But we inadvertently fall into being performative. And I knew that those things were going to need to be stripped away from me. And I knew that I was going to have to admit that all the experiences I had, be good, bad, and indifferent, I was going to have to share the depth of those stories and those experiences so that it could be relatable, because I didn't want women to hear me and to see me and to think I got it together. She hasn't had it this bad. I had to really embrace all of the things that make me who I am in doing that. And so as I stepped into the boldness coach and that persona, and I accepted everything that came with it, which meant talking about my life. And also not blaming other people. I had to really let go of the victimhood and take ownership and responsibility for the choices I made, how I was showing up, the opportunities that I missed, the opportunities that were in front of me. I had to take total responsibility of who I am. And that within itself took a few years of work also, because that meant that looking at the woman in the mirror, just like your client said that she went to Miami, I had to really learn to embrace the simple, everyday, mundane things of life
Yeah.
and find the beauty in the mundane. Because I would tell my therapist, like, I need stuff to do and this and that. And the therapist, like, Venice, sometimes life is boring. And I was like, it is?
Right.
Because I was so used to being performative. So I had to really calm down and experience the fullness and richness of life. And so as I did that, and in the solitude, I had to learn to listen to my spirit. I had to really learn things about myself. I had to really discover the interconnectedness of being a human being and a spiritual being. I had to discover the connectedness of community. I also had to understand my ministry. We all came here, April. We all have our individual ministries. So there was a lot of getting to know the root of who I am. And it also was a lot of showing up in life and engaging in life in a non performative, but a vulnerable and open way. And so as I traveled that journey, I started talking to other women. And I started with just being transparent and telling them my story and giving them space where, there was psychological safety. There's no judgment here. There's no prescription here. There's no diagnosis here. We are just having an exchange of a conversation. No wrong, right, good, or bad. And I realized that as I was talking to women, that I was allowing them to give themselves permission to really just be, to just be. And so the acronym from the boldness coach is bold, big, bad. Bold stands for becoming out loud daily, in every day, in every way. Every day we are in our becoming, which allows us to give ourselves grace to grow. Because sometimes it's a struggle to let go of who we used to be.
Yes.
Because it's comforting, right? We know that devil, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But we don't know who we get to become. So every day is a new opportunity for you to become out loud and to stand in who you are. Big stands for building in your genius. We all have been given at least one talent. And if we are to tap into that talent and go deep with it, it can change our lives in an exponential way. So that allows us to be able to know we can solve our own problems. We don't need something externally. The solution is within us, and the talent is innate that's already been given to us. And we've been given the grace to be able to actually play in the space with our talents, right? And then the bad is being audaciously daring. It's like really showing up and having the audacity to go after what it is that we know we are worthy of. When you hear a lot of people say, well, I deserve this and deserve that. Well, sometimes deserving comes on the heels of being performative.
Yeah.
Because you do this thing, therefore. Worthiness is you were already born with that given to you on the inside. So you don't have to do anything other than just be. And so that living from those principles every day in every way and showing up and continually sharing my story and accepting the ministry of my life, and that my life is the curriculum that I teach from now. And so that in itself helps other women, and it continually heals me and opens me up to tell those stories. But even though I'm 57, I'll be 58 in the summer, but I've lived a lot of life and I got more life to live.
Yeah.
So being that demonstration and being an example allows me to help women. As long as I'm learning and going through an experience in life, is I can continue to help other women to do the same and help them to give themselves permission to do that.
I love it. I love
Thank
it.
you.
And I, for one, am grateful
Yes.
that you walked your healing journey and still healing, right? I think
Yes.
healing is continuous.
Yeah.
And I thank you
Mm,
just for the work that you're doing
thank you.
because we need it. Like just listening to you today, I'm like, ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm taking things away. So I first want to say just thank you again for being on the podcast. I tell people all the time, I don't just pick guests to pick guests. There are people that apply to be on the show that don't make it. And it's simply because I am very protective of what this
Yes.
audience hears because
Rightfully
I've been
so.
on this journey. And so I just want to say thank you
Mm,
for being on the show today. And then I want you to speak to the person that has maybe listened to the episode and they're saying, April, I can relate, but I just don't know what to do next, or I'm just not sure. Speak to that woman who might be listening and is in that space.
what I would say to that woman listening right now, and you say, I don't know what to do next, when you just even expressing that you don't know what to do really is a form of surrender. So give yourself grace for the ability to even say that out loud and acknowledge, I don't know what to do. And when you say that, throw your hands up because that is also a physical form of surrender. I don't know what to do next. So I'm just not going to do anything. So know that you do not have to know the next right step. You do not have to do the next right step. Your role is to just be. That's it. So once you tell yourself that, throw your hands up and just sit in solitude and in quiet and stare out the window. Like give yourself a place and turn your phone off. Give yourself a place where you're not distracted. So whether that's sitting in the park in your car and just looking at people walking by, or whether that's listening to a favorite song and really embodying the energy from that song, whether it's reading your favorite Bible verse without trying to dissect it, but just reading it and feeling the words and the vibration from the word. No, or whether it's you just walking around your house and sweeping the floor and humming a song and not even giving yourself direction on which way to sweep. You're just moving. So give yourself permission to just be in the moment without a prescription of what to do next. And then allow the spirit to talk to you. And when you find yourself trying to figure out, well, I'll do this and I'll do that, I'm going to really challenge you to surrender directives that you come up with from your mind. And you got to check to see if there's a heart and mind connection, or is it that your mind, because that's what you would normally divert to, right? Is your mind doing things? So give yourself surrender, throw your hands up, surrender, allow yourself to be, and have a careful eye on yourself that you are not being performative because that's what you always did. And just enjoy the simple beauty of just being in that moment.
Yes, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You said something that I say frequently, and I just love to hear. Give yourself some grace.
Yes.
Sometimes we are so hard on ourselves,
Mm,
right? Give yourself the same grace you would give your best friend. Give yourself some grace. So, Venice, as we close, let the people know where can they connect with you. I bring people on who are resources, y'all. So my feelings won't be hurt if you need her, if you need to connect with her. So let the people know where can they connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can connect with me at my website, theboldnesscoach.com. And I'll make sure that I give it to April to put in her show notes. So theboldnesscoach.com. If you forget that, just Google me, Venice Johnson. I'm on IG, I'm on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast called The Evolution of Bold. And so that podcast is really talking about the journey and the evolution of us becoming out loud daily as women. So you can find me all over the place. I also have a book. You see this in the background. It's called Bold Isms, Disruptive Thoughts to Help You to Live Bold, Big, and Bad. You can get that book on Amazon, or you can reach out to me and say, Venice, I want to get the book, and I will order it and autograph it and mail it to you.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So yes, y'all, if y'all have listened to this episode and you want to please connect with her.
Yes,
She is awesome. So thank you again, Venice, for being here today.
you're welcome. Thank you, April, for having me. The best is yet to be.
Yes, yes. So, all right, y'all. I once again am super excited for this to be our first episode of season 3. I think that it is no coincidence that it is coming out at the beginning of the year because I just feel like the nuggets that were dropped today are things that will just take us into 2026 and help us to have an amazing year. So, once again, if you have listened to the show before, thank you, thank you, thank you for sticking with me. If it is your first time, please go back and listen to some of the other episodes. I guarantee you there are just nuggets upon nuggets upon nuggets. And then lastly, if this has blessed you, share it. Just share it with someone. That's all that I ask so that you and I are ready when love comes.